What is going on, everyone? Tim from Tierfon Orbital. So today I would like to go over an install commission that I completed on a custom hilt from Kennedy Custom Props. This was done by my buddy Adam over at Kennedy Customs. He is across the pond in the UK. Adam does unique one-off hilts, and this is no exception. This is a very, very unique looking hilt. Very unique install on this one too. So I want to go over that. I do want to come into Fusion and talk about the chassis, and I do want to talk about the install as well. So we're going to come up top, talk about how to use it. But first, obviously, I do want to come into Fusion. I want to talk about how this chassis marries up into the upper part of the hilt, because it is a little bit of an intricate and delicate situation, right? So to the customer, you and I have discussed this previously before the install started. So I do want to talk about that now. So let's get into it. Let's talk about it. Let's come down into Fusion, okay? Okay, so here it is. This is the chassis that I designed for this hilt. Let's start at the top this time, right? Because the top of this chassis does look a little weird. The way that the crystal chamber in this, it's probably going to be a lot easier visually when we come up top to talk about this, but the way that this chassis secures into the upper part of the hilt is through a brass bar and epoxy JB weld. Like, full disclosure, full transparency, right? Unfortunately, there are no like threaded rods or anything that are going into the chassis itself. However, there is a brass rod that penetrates into the chassis just to kind of help secure the chassis a little bit more. I did talk to the customer before this install just to let him know, and he was fully aware of this, right? So that is how the chassis is secured in place. There is a very, very short brass rod, and then everything else is epoxied into place, right? So let's talk about the chassis itself first. The reason that I flipped it, usually when I design my chassis, I have my battery oriented at the bottom. But the reason I have the Proffie board at the bottom with this one is because there is a very uniquely placed slot or window in the grip. And the customer actually had a great idea to utilize that window for a kill switch, for kill switch access, right? This is a Proffie board build. Anytime we can have a kill switch on the outside of the build or outside of the hilt is awesome, in my opinion. And I thought that was a great idea. However, the only way we would have been able to achieve that, because this was such a thin internal diameter build, was to go with a smaller battery and have the Proffie board low, right? That way I would be, with clearance, I would have been able to get a kill switch down here. I feel like I've been doing a lot of 18350 builds lately. So luckily for me, the customer actually subscribes to the same belief that I do, in that we don't, 18350s don't get a lot of love. Anytime that I have a chance to do a build with an 18350, I don't mind doing it. Of course, I always get the one or two folks in the comments that say, why are you using a small battery? You never get a lot of runtime out of a battery with 18350. I'm never bringing any of these builds, 18350 battery builds, to cons, nor am I using them for more than like 45 minutes. I've used some of these for an extended period of time, and I'm fine with their run length. In fact, I've got hilts that are sitting on my shelf that I haven't had to recharge in a long time, right? And whenever I have to, it is very easy for me to just put a new battery in them. I don't understand what the problem is with just swapping batteries, but hey, to each their own, and that's perfectly fine. However, you know, there are those of us that are perfectly fine with having an 18350 battery. So this particular build has an 18350 battery up top, and at the bottom, we've got our Proffie board, okay? Each side of the chassis does have some light greebly work. At the bottom, there is a 22 millimeter Nano Elite Speaker. These are from Smuggler's Outpost, fully enclosed. Here's that kill switch. Above the kill switch, I have a red and blue square LED for some extra accent. And that is it, right? And then up top, just a very unique situation with how this marries up into the upper part of the hilt, okay? So we have we need clearance for where the wires are, right? So the wires can't butt up. The crystal chamber is flat up here, so I can't have my wires butt up against that flat part. Otherwise, they'll pinch. And I also need a little bit of surface area for that JB weld to kind of touch that crystal chamber. I also wanted to have a little bit of, there were pre-drilled holes in that crystal chamber, so I added a brass rod to just give it a little bit of extra bite, right? So, you know, I was fully transparent with the customer on this one. Just, you know, you need to be a little bit delicate with this guy when the grip is off. Anytime that I'm just epoxying a long chassis like this, it makes me a little bit wary, right? But I'm pretty happy with how it came out, right? So that's it. Let's come up top. Okay, so here it is. This is called the GallowGlass from Kennedy Custom Props over in the UK. I believe GallowGlass is the name that both the customer and Adam came up with for this particular hilt. Super, super unique hilt, right? We've got some... when I was doing the design for this hilt, I called it the Trident hilt. So we've got some very, very unique tines that are coming out of the emitter here. It's both brass and aluminum. We've got mixed media here. We've with some leather in the grip, brass in the pommel. So one of the things that I really, really appreciate about Adam's builds is that he machines everything in his builds. All of these parts are all hand spun on his lathe. Everything. All of these parts have been made. Even his greeblies. In fact, Adam was kind enough to send me a bunch of greeblies not too long ago. I have not had a chance to use these in any of my builds yet. So this is the kind of stuff that I don't think people appreciate enough of. This is the kind of detail that takes a lot of work and that people just do not appreciate enough of anymore. We're not just like gluing parts on to stuff. This is just a lot of intricate work that goes into a lot of these hilts. This is put on a lathe. A lot of thought goes into doing these hilts, right? So I really, really appreciate the amount of work that goes into these, as with a lot of these hilts, okay? A lot of these makers. So anyhow, right? So let's talk about how to use this guy first, because there is a little bit of a process to get this grip off. So there is a knurled brass thumb screw at the back here. Let's take that off first. So once you take that knurled brass thumb screw off, you can take this outer grip off. It's kind of like a dual grip situation on this, or actually there's a grip and then there's like an inner core, okay? So you take that knurled thumb screw off and then you can take the grip off. Then there's a core here that is covering the chassis, right? So there is that inner core with the, you know, crystal chamber, brass crystal chamber, all machined. Really, really nice looking crystal chamber. Okay, so once you get that off, you can remove this inner core, and that is held in place with a flathead screw. So you can remove that. Now when removing this, be a little bit delicate, right? Actually, that came off pretty easy. So I did add a little bit of gun lubricant in here just to kind of help it come off. Right, so where this chassis is married in place, it is just JB welded with that, like I said, that brass rod is in there as well. So I was completely transparent with the customer for this build, and the customer was perfectly fine with this. One second, my dog is... So I was completely transparent with the customer on this build before he even started. I let him know, like, look, the way that this chassis is going to have to marry up into this crystal chamber is going to have to be with JB weld and some brass bars, and he was perfectly fine with that. He was actually aware that he also has installed lightsabers before, so he was perfectly fine with that, right? So to you, the customer, it's a long chassis. Just be aware of that. Try not to knock this around while the grip is off. Try not to drop it, obviously. But other than that, really, really beautiful presentation as far as how this exposed crystal chamber is. I do have a single neopixel up here that shines down into that crystal chamber area. There is a quartz crystal in here that was sent with the hilt, right? The whole crystal chamber is held in place with some knurled lugs here. Okay, so if you find that this is kind of getting knocked loose a little bit, you can tighten these lugs just to help it secure a little bit more, okay? So let's get a battery. This is sized for a flat top protected 18350 battery. So put your battery in that battery tray. So this was already on. I'm going to turn this off. So once you get your battery in, you can put that inner core back on, or that sleeve. Just kind of slide it up into place. Line your hole up. So you want to put that flathead screw in first. So that flathead screw will hold that core in place. There is a very keenly designed notch in the outer grip. So line up that notch with that flathead screw. Okay. Flip it around and you can add your knurled thumb screw that will hold the grip in place. And then you can hit your kill switch when the grip is on. So there are those square LEDs. And you're good to go. All right. So let's come down to the bottom. Okay, so there's that exposed slot. Really, really unique looking hilt. Let's put a blade in it. Okay, so this is a 1-inch blade holder. I believe that Adam ships all of his hilts with a custom blade plug. So this also has a custom blade plug that came with it. Very cool looking brass machined blade plug, right? So take that blade plug out. So another thing that I want to mention, right? The PCB holder for this build is floating, right? I did not want to pop a hole for a PCB holder in this build because there's a lot of the inner brass core of this is not flat. There's a lot of concave areas of this, and I did not want to pop a hole in here and ruin the aesthetic of this. So the PCB holder is just free floating in there. So as you put your blade in, it's just going to kind of push that PCB holder down. So just kind of push your blade down until it stops and then tighten your set screw and then you'll be good to go, okay? So there are those two blinking LEDs in that slot. It's a great feeling hilt, nicely balanced. Okay. Let's see what else we put on here.
What is it? Father.
stand back from the mic. One more.
Ascension.
Nice hilt. Nice hilt. So that is it. That is the GallowGlass from Adam over at Kennedy Custom Props. Really, really unique looking hilt. Dangerous looking hilt with these spikes here. But yeah, always appreciate when I get one-off hilts like this. I can always appreciate the amount of time and effort and design work that goes into something like this. And I don't think a lot of people can appreciate the amount of work that goes into this. This is all like a lot of machine work goes into something like this, right? So, I mean, it's functional art in my opinion. So anyhow, to the customer, thank you very, very much for trusting me with your install. If anyone has any questions about this particular install or anything really, please do not be a stranger. And with that being said, may the force be with you. Thanks for watching, everybody.